Welcome to the One Priority Podcast, where our goal is starting and strengthening congregations to serve as vital and vibrant missional communities. The One Priority Podcast is sponsored and supported by the Columbia Metro Baptist Association and the almost 100 family churches that support the ministry of the CMBA. This week, I, Chris Reinolds, lead pastor at Discovery Church, and George Bullard, executive director of the CMBA, sat down with Cathy Locklear to celebrate and hear about her many years of service with the Columbia Metro Baptist Association here in Columbia, South Carolina, as she is preparing for a new and exciting stage in her life.
Thank you, Chris. We're pleased to have Cathy Locklear with us for this special podcast because this is a special time in her life and in her ministry. We're pleased that Cathy Locklear has served in various roles with the Columbia Metro Baptist Association over the last 22 years, currently as the Impacting Communities Mobilizer. She's a faithful, effective, and innovative servant for the Lord in this particular position. Cathy, 22 years ago, what led you to connect with the Columbia Metro Baptist Association? I think you connected first in hunger ministry, but what led you to do that, and what was going on in your life that God pulled you forward into this great opportunity?
You know, George, there has never been a doubt that I am where I am supposed to be. And it started back then because of family dynamics changing, multiple children, needing to get some part-time versus full-time, and doors kept opening. I had never heard of the Columbia Metro Baptist Association until about 2 weeks before I came to work here.
Huh.
But, well, I know that's odd. But the doors just kept opening. I went to my pastor and I said, listen, I need to go part-time somewhere, and I really can't afford it, and, need some extra income and that kind of thing. And he said, Cathy, he said, you always step up with our missions. He said, Columbia Metro Baptist Association has an opening for someone to work in their hunger ministry and run food pantries. And I thought, never done that before, but interviewed with Dr. Platt, Paul McKee, wonderful, saw the heart here at the association, and there was no doubt this is where I should be. So everything just fell together.
Yeah, well, I would say anybody that interviews with John Platt has got to come away feeling that I'm indeed a person of worth, because this guy loves everybody. He was a wonderful director, and so I'm glad you got to be able to come when he was there. So what was the position like when you started?
Totally different. Like I said, all I wanted was just a little part-time job. Well, it started out that way, and it was great. 2 days a week, couple hours, go in, manage the hunger ministry, speak to churches about their involvement in the hunger ministry, and actually interviewing clients, which I found fascinating. During that time, I really saw even more of a need in what I needed to do, and that I was in the right place. But it was very part-time and very single-sided hunger ministry. And then something just happened.
That's great. That's great. First of all, Cathy, I want to thank you for your faithfulness to the ongoing work of working with the churches that make up the CMBA. Over these many years, I'm sure that you've got lots of ammo. I mean, funny experiences that you've had with others and interacted with the pastors and churches and church leaders. What's one thing that you think that would be, appropriate to share with those that are listening in?
I've often thought about that in preparing to speak at other places about funny stories. And oddly enough, I don't know that they're all very appropriate. Not that they're bad, but things happen in the churches that need to stay in the churches, and then things happen at, for instance, those odd places like the state fair, where that's not exactly church appropriate talk either, but they're funny. And I think, I think that when you're in ministry, and you just have to have a sense of humor. You're dealing with all kinds of people, church people, different kinds of people that you're not normally accustomed to. but that sense of humor, it definitely takes a sense of humor to overlook and to overcome some things. But no, I don't know about specific stories. We'll have to talk about that later, Chris and George. Yes.
We can do that, very much so. Well, Cathy, one of the things I appreciate so greatly about you is the institutional memory that you bring, having been in Columbia Metro Association for 22 years. But I also appreciate your passion for ministry that has developed and grown and welled up in you, your concern for people, and your desire to see it get done well in terms of what's happening. So, you know, one of the things I know has changed in my tenure a little bit is that we've tried to refocus ministry as not something separate and apart from the churches, but something integral to helping the churches to be strengthened and even to helping new churches to start. How do you see ministry playing into our one priority of starting and strengthening congregations to serve as vital and vibrant missional communities?
You know, George, personally, over these years, I've grown so much in my awareness of just being aware of people. And I think that when it comes to the churches, ministry and missions play such a large role. It's not just what you do for other people, it's what those people can do for your church. There's a unity when people work together within the church to accomplish a goal, you know, whether it be for the needy or the affluent. And that is something that we don't need to overlook, is ministry does not just apply to the needy and the poor. We need to look at the big picture and the affluent and everyone when it comes to that. But there is unity that comes from that. When a church works together and the different members use their strengths, it really makes a difference in strengthening that church. They can see each other. And of course, the community benefits in the long run, but it's not just community, it's everyone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What are some of do you have any anecdotes of places where you've seen an impact in people or an impact in churches where their involvement in ministry has made a difference?
Oh, there are so many. You know, there's partnerships that have been formed because of, not necessarily because of the Columbia Metro Baptist Association, but the small role that we as an association were able to play. There are churches working with churches in Detroit, Michigan. There are churches working, you know, all over the world because the association stepped up and helped make those connections. There is a very big picture when it comes to missions and ministries and reaching other people and making those connections. It is not just the local church stepping up to do a ministry that we have organized. It is the church itself gaining experience from that ministry, maybe, or gaining a connection that leads to something else within the church and their ministries. It's a big picture there.
I wonder if there are any particular places of joy in some of the ministries, like the hunger ministry. I know is the one that's deepest to your heart because that's the one that you first were asked to participate in. But there's the state fair ministry, there's the women's prison, there's the health kits, the prisoner packets, all kinds of other different things like that. Are there ones of those that you'd like to lift up and say, I sure am hoping that these will even go to the next step in the season after I retire on August 31st?
Oh, most definitely. George, you know, one of the things I've always said, and I believe this with my whole heart, is that, for instance, in the hunger ministry, I would much rather see children or a Sunday school group or whatever bring a few cans of food and don't stop writing those check churches, but then a church just write a check and put it in their budget. that personal touch, it never needs to be overlooked. When that child brings that can of food to Vacation Bible School, that is just as important as that church sticking money in their budget. So that never needs to be forgotten. State fair. When you think about state fair, the high ministry person that we're looking at is the worker. When we work at the state fair and when someone makes brownies to give out, that's going to someone in South Africa. I mean, that ministry spreads. So that spreads. I mean, it's just, and of course, the prison picnic, as far as local missions, when those people get out, if there is one thing they learned and one act of kindness that we gave and showed them, it just makes all the difference in the world as far as changing the world. Maybe they won't go back. Maybe they'll remember something. There's just these little acts of kindness that we can do in our churches, and that as the association, we can facilitate. There's no idea. It's bad that, I'll never know what acts that, I did, and people will never know what they did here on earth that may have influenced someone. So you can't overlook those acts. You've always got to be very conscious with that and intentional. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And Cathy, one of the things that we've often talked about is how to help what we do in ministry to be strategic, to serve people who need particular unconditional love of God through Jesus Christ. In other words, need to be served as persons of worth, created in the image of God, to live and to love. And I think about the state fair and the shift we made in the last 4 years, that we can do ministry busyness, but every once in a while we have to figure out, now, who is actually being served here and where are we making a difference? Share with us about the difference you believe we're making with the carnies at the state fair.
George, that is a perfect example of that shift that we made. We had a state fair, pre-fair ministry where we did intentionally, feed the carnies as they were setting up. And I always heard that part of the reason we did that when I first came to work at the association was, if they weren't worried about food, they would make those rides safer and everything. And that is true on a certain level. But there again, we're looking at those people that are coming to the fair. There was nothing wrong with that. We would have the people come to the fair. We'd have a booth. They would come by. They would sit in a rocking chair. We would talk to them as much as we could. But there again, they're there for the fair. They're not there to sit and have an in-depth conversation. So we sat down, took a look at that. Like I said, this is one example of when we sat down, took a look at it and said, who is our real target there? And it is those carnival workers. And I think that we make a difference with that. And there have been churches that have stepped up and done other things. They've facilitated funerals. Those carnival workers don't have families. They've done weddings at the carnival, at the fair. And, it's just been intentional. And that's the word. It needs to be intentional at who you're ministering to and know your target.
Good.
That's great, Cathy. We've seen tremendous success in many of those places that you just explained, but as a pastor, I'm all about the stories. Can you tell us a couple of stories about how you've seen hearts and lives transformed through the work of the gospel and to the work that you've been able to participate in?
Well, okay, stories about, there's a million stories. Over these 20-something years, there's been a lot of stories. I think, the best stories are, and not the best, are seeing, like, for instance, when I work with a youth group, watching those youth groups grow over the years. I've seen people come to Christ. I've had the privilege of leading people to Christ through these ministries myself. It has just been, I don't know if I could highlight one story, and it's been such a learning curve. It's not just the people that benefited, it's us. I'll tell you a story. It's a personal story. It is how I have grown and something that touched my heart. I was there about 2 weeks. And I was interviewing a lady through the hunger ministry, and we had this form and we were filling out, how much money they had coming into the house versus how much money they had going out of the house. And this lady, I did what I was supposed to do. And I said, looks like you have a lot of money for food. Why are you here? And she said, well, you didn't ask me about my cable bill. Oh, red flag went up. I said, well, why would I ask you about your cable bill? She said, my cable bill is like $186. I remember that amount. And I said, if you didn't have that cable bill, you would be able to feed your children. You need to cut your cable off. Well, this is where we all learn things. She explained to me that she lived in one of the project complexes, and that she had 3 teenage boys, and that she would much rather them be inside renting movies on cable than outside taking part in gang activity. We are all able to learn and grow through missions and ministries. There's, mine was a very eye-opening experience, but we all can learn. But so the people at the churches can learn just as much as the people out that need us.
Really good lesson for everyone.
Yes.
Cathy, as you conclude this portion of the ministry of your life, because I know your life is going to continue to be a ministry, and when you think about the churches that you've worked with in our association, is there something you'd want to say to the churches about their commitment to community ministry and to impacting the communities around them, and things that you would hope and wish for them that they would embrace and allow God to embrace them through in terms of ministry?
Well, first of all, I would thank them all because, over these years, the churches have really stepped up in participation with the association and in the appreciation. I really appreciate their ministries and the missions at the local church, and how even when we spread it out and didn't do as many central missions projects, the churches kept going. And that is just wonderful. And that's what they need to continue to do. And to make them aware that we definitely have resources at the association, other resources, be it financial, be it block party trailer. And don't forget the importance of coming to the association with those needs right off the bat. And of course, that missions is what the church is called to do, to reach out to the community. And I think I mentioned earlier that, and it's not just reaching out to the poor. We need to find out a way and work intentionally on a way to reach out to the affluent. They need Jesus just as much. I think sometimes that's a segment of population that we overlook, and we need to make sure we, reach out to them. But just thanking the association for the opportunity and the churches for their participation in missions, and remembering that it's not just about who you minister to, it's your people. It's the people within the church that really benefit.
Cathy, again, how much I appreciate you and about how you have been such a servant in our association. So I want everyone to know that though you'll be retiring on August the 31st, we're going to have a time of celebrating Cathy and rejoicing in her ministry. And that's being planned for either in September or October. We want to have plenty of on-ramp time to plan that event. And we've worked with Cathy on looking at a couple of dates. And so those of the people watching this podcast need to be aware of the fact that there'll be a time for you to personally thank Cathy for her ministry among us. And we'll be letting you know about that in many different ways and inviting you to that experience.
Thank you, George.
Well, thank you, Cathy, so much for joining with us, and thank you for your faithfulness to Jesus' work in the Columbia Metro area.
you. Thank you.
And to all of our listeners, thank you for joining with us. And please be sure to check out the show notes for more detailed information about today's show. Also, if you found this podcast helpful for you and your ministry, share it with others so we can get the word out about what God is doing. Until next time, from all of us, we thank you for listening and urge you to share this podcast with everyone you know. It's the good news about the good news in the Columbia Metro Baptist Association.